Welcome to the Unlist. We are at video number 50. I have released 50 individual, unique pieces of fragrance-related video content. And this is a point in time where some people might actually request feedback from their audience. They might ask for, what do you guys want to see? But I'm not doing that, because you should know by now, I do what I want. I'm not here to get popular or make money. I'm here to just provide my insights and my opinions and a little bit of historical knowledge and some facts along with it. So it's a mixed media. It's not direct editorial, but it's also not direct reference guide either. It's a mixture of the two. And I talk about whatever tickles my fancy. And y'all are just, strapped in along for the ride. You're almost like a captive audience, right? And if you don't want to be, then you can hit the subscribe button and unsubscribe from me and go away, and I will not care. So, and thus this video is about my favorite Avon fragrances. One of the least loved, least talked about, least respected houses in all of the online fragrance community, and I'm making it my official 50th video. That shows you how much I care about popularity, right? I'm wasting my 50th milestone on a mail order house that no one really cares about, because my Avon videos, like I suspected, have done the least amount of views out of pretty much any video I've put up, except for maybe one. I think my Diorella video is probably the lowest count of viewers of all my videos, but my Avon videos are pretty close to it. So, and I don't care. They're some of my favorite videos because Avon is one of my favorite brands to talk about. So I'm happy, and that, at the end of the day, that's all that really matters, whether I enjoy doing this or not. So with that, let's get going. My favorite all-time Avon fragrances. Well, that's a hard unlist to compile, considering that I have over like 800 choices from which to choose. And I don't want to make a 3-hour video, right? I did those on Instagram, and they didn't work out too well for me. So I keep it under 25 minutes if I can. So let's kick it off with Avon for Men from 1949. This is actually the first proper Avon branded fragrance for men. Now, under the name of California Perfume Company, Avon had a couple of, I guess you could call them clones, but they had their own Bay Rum, and they had their own Lilac Vegetal, which they sold in these grooming kits, DOP kits, that you could buy. Because at that time, the California Perfume Company only made perfume. They didn't really do cosmetics, but they did little shaving kits that had these fragrances in them, Lilac Vegetal and Bay Rum. The Bay Rum stuck around. The Lilac Vegetal did not. They kept making the Bay Rum. Eventually, it evolved into Avon for Men Spicy. And then from there, the Avon for Men name was dropped, and it became Avon Spicy by like the end of the 60s. They did bring the proper original Bay Rum formula back, the one that David Hall McConnell had created in the early 1900s. They did bring that one back in the, I think, late 70s or early 80s to celebrate their anniversary. But yeah, those don't count as their first proper Avon branded men's fragrance, because the Bay Rum was frankly not an original composition. It was an adaptation, since everyone at that time was doing Bay Rums. Lilac Vegetal was kind of a shameless ripoff of the Pinot fragrance, because Lilac Vegetal is a Pinot creation, right? So Avon for Men in 1949 was actually a big deal. It was the first flagship fragrance and grooming range for men, dedicated for men by Avon, and they actually got some famous people to back it up. It had Joe DiMaggio, the baseball player, and Jimmy Stewart, the actor, were both faces for the Avon for Men range for a number of years, from 49 into probably the end of the 50s. This fragrance stood almost alone. It had a semi-flanker. It was a unique fragrance that was lumped in with Avon for Men called Vigorate, and Vigorate came out in 1957. Didn't do that well, though. It's very, very hard to come by. Not expensive, because Avon fragrances typically aren't, but it's hard to find. So really, Avon for Men was it for men, until about 1963, when they expanded the Avon for Men name to encompass an entire subdivision of the company, and they could knock out different fragrances that were Avon for Men fragrances, but it was like a men's division within Avon. So the original Avon for Men fragrance only lasted from 49 until 63, which is still a long time. I mean, hell, that's 14 years, right? That's a pretty long time. So what does it smell like? Well, this is why it's one of my favorites. It's a very classic, very by the numbers fougere. Not a powdery vanilla style Dana Canois fougere, not a Clubman Pinot fougere, not powdery, not vanillic. It's also not a super pine monster, like a lot of Italian fougeres, like a lot of the Victor stuff, Pinot Silvestri and all that. They were very heavy pine fragrances. They were still fougeres, but just very focused on woods. This is neither of that. This is the very classic, original French style fougere, like Fougere Royale by Houbigant, like Bouchoir de Monsieur by Guerlain, Jicky also sort of like. That's the vein in which this fragrance travels. And Avon for Men is actually kind of unique among those options because Avon for Men actually reverses the role of lavender and geranium. It's actually geranium more and lavender less, which gives it a sort of minty, fresh, green quality. I mean, the lavender is still there. You can definitely tell the lavender is there, but it's geranium ahead of the lavender. And then beyond that, it's a pretty simple formula. You know, your bergamot up top, no aldehydes to speak of. And then the base is just going to be tonka. It's going to be sandalwood because that was plentiful and easy to get back then. So tonka, sandalwood, some oak moss, and a little patchouli. And that's it. Very simple fragrance. You could probably make it yourself. If you could analyze it and figure out what's in it, you can make it yourself. It's very simple, but it works very well. And the cologne iteration of it had a little bit of nitro musk, just enough nitro musk to give it a round, rich, vavoom kind of quality. The aftershave version didn't have the nitro musk, so it feels woodier. It feels a little bit more lucid. Doesn't have that creamy, rounded edge because it doesn't have the musk profile in it. But it does add camphor, not menthol, but camphor, a little bit of camphor. And that gives it a vivaciousness to it. It makes it go off skin. And the idea is, with this fragrance, like a lot of early Avon fragrances, you're meant to layer all of the different products together. So you shave with the shave cream. You put the aftershave on behind it. You put the cologne behind your ears or wherever your pulse points are. And then maybe a little bit of the talcum powder to dry your skin off. And they even had a liquid deodorant that was scented the same way. And you put the liquid deodorant on your armpits and wherever else you don't want to sweat. So then all these products combine together to create this very nice geranium-centric fougere accord. And it's classic, kind of timeless, and I love it. It's a shame that it's not made anymore. You know, it's the kind of thing that niche brands would go gaga for, right? You know, you could take something like this, even though it's an Avon product, and you can market it in a niche bottle and like sell it for $300, and somebody would buy it. So that's why I like it so much. Next up on the list, a little less to talk about, a little more cut and dry, is an Avon fragrance from 1966 called Avon Leather. Another men's fragrance. We will cover some women's stuff too because I love some of those. But Avon Leather came out in 1966, and it's a very sort of it's in the Russian leather style. So think birch tar. It's not going to be a bunch of aldehydes, a bunch of powderiness. It's not a Nietzsche 10 style leather. It's not really heavy on isobutylquinoline or pyrrolone. It's not the mousse de Saxe kind of a vibe. It's definitely more of that Russian leather vibe. So you're going to get birch tar. You're going to get some ambery notes. You're going to get some spices. You're going to get a little bit of aldehydes up top. Definitely some anise in there though. And then of course oak moss out the wang, and a little bit of castoreum too is in there. So it's going to be that more muted brown, like brown belt style of leather, but it's really nice. And it comes in a bottle that's shaped like a boot. I swear, it looks like a boot. Like it's literally a boot filled with leather cologne, and it's fantastic. Very dark, very rich. Like I said, it's not your Aramis kind of thing at all. So it's for people who like your older style, like Santa Maria Novella style leathers. This is like that, but not as hairy, because that's got a lot of castoreum in it. It's very hairy fragrance. This is a little less hairy. This is more like a supermarket take on the Santa Maria Novella. And that little bit of amberiness in the base also makes it nice and rich and smooth. It's just perfect. And the aftershave is great. The cologne is great. The other products that comes in are also great. Next up, favorite Avon fragrance is going to be a women's fragrance from the 50s. It's called Persian Wood, and it came out in, I believe, 1954. And Persian Wood it's a more of an amber fragrance, really. It's a spicy, woody amber, but it's not a woody amber in the way you think of now with all the woody amber chemicals and all that stuff, the harsh, like wood shop style, sandpaper kind of stuff like you get in a lot of modern men's fragrances. No, it's a truly woody amber fragrance. So you're getting the labdanum, you're getting the spices, you're getting the musks, and you're getting natural wood materials. You're going to get sandalwood in this fragrance as well. Okay, this is literally a woody amber fragrance, not woody amber. And regardless of who it was marketed for, it was marketed for women, but guess what? It's just a wonderful woody amber scent, a true woody amber scent. And if you like those, you will like Avon Persian Wood. Go check it out. You can get splashes. They also made a pressurized spray, but a lot of those leaked. So finding one of those that still works is a bit tough. So you may want to stick with the splash bottles, a little bit easier to come by in a preserved state due to the age of the fragrance. 50s is a long time ago. It's like 70 years ago now. Next up, we are going to fast forward to the end of the 60s, and we come across another Avon fragrance, a women's fragrance that I really enjoy. It's called Elusive from 1969. Now, Elusive comes in this cute pink bottle. It looks almost like something you would see in like Disney's Aladdin. It has that vibe, that minaret tower shape with the pink and the filigree details. It's supposed to be patterned after Indian culture, but I've never seen anything in India that looks like that. I mean, nothing in India really looks like Arabian Nights anyway, so I feel like it's one of those typical dumb white person things, you know, 60s Americana, regurgitated Far East culture, you know, just like the Kmart Kraft macaroni and cheese version of Indian culture. Pretty offensive if you really want to get down to brass tacks, pretty offensive. But I don't care about that. It smells fantastic. Just ignore the stupid packaging and ignore the stupid ad copy, you know, the borderline racist ad copy, and just think about the scent itself. What you get in this bottle is basically a very musk prominent floral fragrance. It almost reminds me of Kouros, if Kouros was made for a woman and made like 15 years earlier, because 81 was when Kouros came out, right? This came out like 68, 69. So this fragrance does the same thing. It has a very civet prominent base, you know, reminds me of the Cinnamon Animalis that you find in the Kouros. And it has a similar white floral profile in the heart that Kouros has. A bit of soapiness, okay, a bit of muget in there, some honeyed notes, some benzoin in there, some patchouli, okay. The key difference is the top notes are entirely different because it's keyed for what the conventional feminine taste was in the 60s. So you get a lot of stuff like hyacinth up top, and you get a lot of sort of like fleshy kind of maybe not exactly tuberose, but those kind of materials, you know, some ylang ylang is in there. So it's not going to smell quite as locker room, shower room as like Kouros does. You're definitely going to get a floral element that you have to be okay with. But once you get past it and you dig into the rest and you get into the vetiver, the oak moss, the galbanum is very prominent as well. You get that really musky, virile accord that just kind of vibes with what Kouros would later be. But here it is in an Avon bottle, marketed to women in the late 60s. Fantastic. Again, it's got a cologne, it's got an eau de toilette, which was a spray. It has a pure parfum, which is a super concentrated like rollerball oil. You know, it's got a bunch of different formats which you can get this stuff in, but it's called Elusive, and it's one of my favorites from Avon. Next up, we move into the 70s. 1970 actually, and we have two fragrances that are among my favorite from the same year. The first one is a men's, the second one is a women's. We have Hollande, released in 1970. It feels to me like a precursor to something like Etienne Aigner number 1, something like Giacomo Osendre, you know, something like Halston 112. So imagine a sort of castoreum leather, like those fragrances are all castoreum-based leathers. And it's got some floral, spicy qualities up top, that rounded floral, spicy, kind of some almost bay rum sort of elements. So it's an interesting sort of tobacco leather hybrid with a bit of smokiness in it, a bit of sweetness too. It also kind of vibes a little bit with Stetson, but Stetson is way more floral, way more ambery than this is. But if you like that sort of Baroque, almost spicy, tobacco-y, leather, just, you know, what I call the brown smell. And you've smelled 112, you've smelled Etienne Agenais No. 1, you've smelled Giacomo Cendre. You already know where my head's at, okay? You're already thinking Ricardo Montalban and the old Chrysler Cordoba commercials. You're already there in your headspace, okay? You know, paneled walls, shag carpet, someone's listening to Three Dog Night in the background on their component system stereo, shooting pool in the club basement. You're already there, okay? You're already in the right place. That's what you get with Olan, Avon Olan from 1970. Even the bottle just screams 70s. It's great. It's fantastic. The women's fragrance from that year, that's one of my favorites, is called Charisma. And Charisma is another sort of soapy / animalic floral fragrance, a sheep. This one's a much greener sheep than Elusive, though. Elusive is definitely more of a floral, musky thing. This one focuses more on galbanum, on bergamot. It's got some aldehydes in it actually up top. And it focuses on like a rosewood accord. And it uses geranium, a little bit of real rose or some rose proxy material, and then the rosewood accord. And then that rosewood and that bergamot and the galbanum, they slide straight into the oak moss and into the civet that's in the base. So you get the soapiness up top and the clean floral notes in the rosewood, and then you get the stank-a-dank in the base. And it's that contrast that I really, really love with Avon Charisma. And this fragrance was remarkably popular, despite being an animalic fragrance. They continued making it into the 70s, in the 80s. It got reissued a whole bunch, so they must have done something right with it. But yes, Avon Charisma, 1970, check it out. Moving right along, there's a lot of good stuff in the 70s that I could name, but if we're going with absolute favorites, things that I reach for the most, we're not going to find anything else that really grabs my attention all that much until we hit 1980 with Black Suede, which is my all-time most worn favorite fragrance, period, regardless of house. I don't really need to tell you, you already know what Black Suede is about. It's a combination aldehyde leather and amber fragrance. So you get the aldehydes, you get the leather notes, you get the isobutylquinoline, aka pyrrolone, but then you also get a lot of mandarin and spice notes, and then, of course, you're going to get that amber accord in the base. And it also has a very unusual tiny drop of like an orris iris kind of feeling, a little bit of like a makeup compact handbag kind of smell too. More so in the 90s bottles than in the 80s bottles, because there was two different formulas. The original 80s formula is actually cleaner because it was Avon's own formula. When they got rid of their in-house perfume and they went to doing IFF and fermentation, all that, they had to get the fragrance recomposed because they have different materials. And when they recomposed Black Suede in the 90s, it actually got a little more animalic. Surprisingly, it got a little more animalic and more spicy. And that version from the 90s, I actually prefer over the older version. I have bottles of the older version for reference, but it's cleaner and simpler. So if you really want the good Black Suede, you got to get the bottles from the late 90s, early 2000s. That's what you really want. That's the good stuff. The 80s stuff is good too. The 80s stuff is better than the new stuff, for sure. But it's simpler, and to me, I feel like it's missing something because it doesn't have that little bit of to it. Now we scoot right on along, and we come to another 80s Avon fragrance that I like a whole lot. And it is called Imari from 1987. And it is another, surprisingly, sort of semi-animalic, virile sort of floral fragrance. This one, though, is a little more 80s, so you're going to get more aldehydes, you're going to get more noticeable rose. It's not going to be as heavy on the white floral stuff like the 60s and 70s stuff is. But again, if you like your big, bold, broad-shouldered chypre fragrances for women, then Avon Amari is worth checking out. It's good stuff. And then also, some of my favorites from that era. I can't talk very long because I'm running out of time here. So I say honorable mentions from the 80s. Avon Rugger from 82 is also really nice. Avon Ares from 85 is also really nice. Avon Signet from 87 is also really nice. Now into the 90s, things get a little bit spicier for me. Avon Mesmerize from 1992 is really, really good. That was Avon's attempt to make something like a Heritage, like a Tiffany for Men, like a Bois de Portugal, one of those style of semi-oriental fougères. It's a little sweeter than most of the others because it has an apple note in it. And it also has a little more, by the way, of vanilla in it. But it's a very nice, spicy, sweet, semi-oriental fougere that I think is timeless. You can wear it now. It's great. Also, in 1994, a women's musk fragrance came out called Night Magic that I think is very unisex and any man could appreciate. If you like a high-quality, clean-smelling white musk fragrance, check out Avon Night Magic from 94. It's worth it. And then moving right along, 1998, we would see an Avon fragrance that I like a lot called Far Away for Men. This is a strange fragrance because it actually has like a plum note mixed into a typical semi-oriental fougere. So imagine something like along the lines of a Lapidus Pour Homme, but replace the pineapple with plum. So it's almost got like a plumeria vibe. It's really interesting. And for a man, that's even more bizarre. But yeah, it's worth checking out. And then into the 2000s, we are getting into some really good stuff now. Into the 2000s, one of my favorite all-time Avon fragrances from 2002 called Avon Paradigm. It's another aldehyde leather fragrance, which to think that somebody was actually making aldehyde leathers in the 2000s, that's really weird. But Avon plays by their own rulebook and they don't care. So here they come out with an aldehyde leather fragrance in 2002 called Paradigm. It's very herbal and also has some soapy notes in it. It's very strange. It's a very Italian style fragrance, but it's coming from this American house. In the UK, it was called Class Act, and in South America, it was called Aspire. But it's known as Paradigm here in the US. Check it out. And then last but not least, we are going to move all the way until, we're going to skip over a bunch, and we're going to zap right up to 2008. The last one, Avon Signature from 2008. Now, Avon Signature is a tobacco fragrance, but it has a very interesting combination of yuzu, bamboo, and green apple in it. And it overlays on top of this sort of leafy tobacco. So if you've smelled something like Vera Wang for Men, or Versace the Dreamer, or something along those lines, or Dolce & Gabbana Pour Homme from 94, that style of really dry, leafy tobacco, not smoky, not sweet, not vanillic, just that dry sort of, you know, cured leaf in the sunlight kind of tobacco note. Take that and throw a bunch of citruses and spices and apple notes on top. It almost reminds me of like an apple pie kind of thing, but sitting on top of a tobacco fragrance. You can wear it in the fall all the way through to spring, and it is fantastic. So there you go, guys. That is my unlist of favorite Avon fragrances. I could have added a much more, but we would need a much longer video for that. And I don't want to give you a much longer video because I have a hard time with you watching my videos as they are in their current length. So maybe I'll do a part 2 sometime, or I'll do a honorable mentions list where I go through and name other ones that I didn't mention in this one. Either way, I hope you enjoyed it, and this has been The Unlist. Thank you for 50 videos.